Okay, so welcome to this practical guide on how to use Cloud Cowork. And we're going to talk about how we can use Cloud on our local computer in order to produce deliverables. And it's going to be a hands-on experience because all the examples we're going to be using is going to be under the video description. So you can download the folders and the guides in order to follow along with us. So for us to understand this concept of Cloud Cowork, we're basically going to use a fake company example called Canvas & Co. And so Canvas & Co. is basically this small art print shop. And the thing about them is that, they have these sale files that are constantly piling up. Their folder is extremely messy. Nobody has no clue what's going on, but somebody has to still go back into that folder in order to produce a monthly report that pretty much looks the same every month. So we're going to see how Cloud Cowork can be useful in these type of situations. And so by the end, you're going to learn how to take this messy folder, turn to organized project. We're going to see how we can make these live sale dashboards or these live artifacts. And then we're going to see how we can make these monthly reports that write in emails itself. And so our agenda is we're going to talk about what Cowork is. We're going to set up our instructions and our projects. We're going to work on our first build, which is cleaning, our second build, which is basically our lifestyle dashboards. And then we're going to focus on our last build, which is basically having that report run itself and email to us. Okay, so what makes Cowork actually different? So a lot of us already have experience with Cloud Chat where we use it to bounce ideas, to ask it questions, to maybe producing some documents and code files, but it's very constrained inside this chat box because even if you're able to produce a document, well, you still need to find a way to download it and import to your computer. If you're working with a code file, well, you still need to find a way to copy and paste it. The reality is, when you're working and producing deliverables, you need to mess with a variety of local files from different types of folders. And so Cloud Chat has that limitation. And so that's where Cloud Cowork comes into the picture. Cloud Cowork can actually run your computer, it can touch your real files in order to help you produce those different types of deliverables. So I want to quickly mention this. When I say that it can run your computer, I'm saying to run your local computer where it can touch your local folders and files in order to produce those deliverables. But now what we're finding is that even Cloud Cowork, if your computer's off, you still have the ability to run it in the background. And so I just want to mention that as of now to this date, right, Cloud can basically run on these max plans as well too. And so this is a feature that they're just slowly rolling out. So in the meantime, what this video is going to focus is just running on your local computer because it seems that that's what is most available to everyone as of now. Okay, so I want to first talk about instructions. So instructions are basically ways in how you can customize Claude and how it engages with you. So the first instructions that we have is instructions for Claude, which is basically the global instructions and how you want Claude to talk to you. The next one is Cowork instructions, which is basically ways in how you want Claude to basically do specific tasks in Cowork. And then we finally have project instructions, which is basically telling Claude about what that project is and how it should work inside that project. So I want to briefly talk about where are these instructions. If you go over to your name and you click on settings and you go to general, you're going to immediately see instructions for Claude. And just immediately reading this, you can tell that this is ways on how I want Claude to talk to me, right? So keep your replies short and easy to skim. Now, if you want to focus on how you want your tasks to be done inside Cowork, you can go over to the Cowork tab, scroll all the way to the bottom, and you're going to see something called global instructions, right? If I click on edit, you're going to see that this type of instruction is more geared to how I want my tasks to be done. Like before you delete, overwrite, or rename any of those files, show me exactly what will change and wait for me to confirm. And then finally comes the project instruction. So this is what we're going to be making. Now, if you haven't had the chance yet, make sure you download all the different types of folders or the starting folder in the video description so you can also follow along with us. So I'm going to go over to my main Claude desktop. I'm going to go over and switch over to Cowork. And then I'm going to click on this drop down and basically create a new project. And so before I give it a name, I'm just going to simply choose the folder. And so this is the folder or the starter folder that you have downloaded in the description. And then I'm basically going to click on Canvas & Co. And then I'm just going to give it a basic name like Canvas & Co. because that's what I want all my data to go into. And then you're going to see this section called instructions, right? So this is basically how I could define how Claude knows about the project and how it should interact with this type of project. And you can see over here that I basically have one already prepared. And I basically say that this project, so I give a little description what it is. And I basically also talk about what I want the tone to be and how I want these documents to be set up. All you have to do now is just create the project. And there you go. Your project is created. And this is what we're going to be working inside. Okay, so we're going to do our first task, which is basically taking that messy folder and organizing it. And besides that, we're also going to talk about these concepts like Claude MD, which is going to provide us a short note for Claude in order to make it easier to navigate in that folder. All right, so I didn't tell you what exactly is inside our folder. Like right now, there's a lot of things that's going on. There's like these invoices, these meetings, I don't know, like it's messy, right? And so I want to see how Cowork can basically help me clean it all up. So what I'm going to do inside here is I have a prompt from my guide that I copied and I'm just going to paste it in here. And the basic idea is I'm just telling it to help me clean the folder and giving me like an idea of what that clean structure could look like, right? So I say, show me the structure you have in mind, which files to go in, and just, wait for me to give you permission to do it. And so in my case, there's a few configuration I'm going to change. This is not a too complicated task. So I don't think we're going to need to have Opus. So I'm just going to simply go for Sonnet 5. And I'm just set it to high. And then I'm also going to set this over to auto approve. So you're going to see three types: manually approve, automatically approve, and skip all the approve. So manual approve is basically this idea that like anytime Claude is going to do something, it's going to ask you permission. Now, automatically approve, though, on the other hand, is more of like, instead of it asking you permission for every single task, it's basically going to keep on running until it deems a task dangerous. And that's when it's going to ask for your permission. And so that just kind of makes it, at least for me, a lot more smoother so I don't have to keep on approving its changes. But some of you guys might want to be there to approve all of its changes just to supervise it, and that's perfectly fine. And then also there's skip all that approval, which is basically letting Claude just go full on by itself. Even if there's some dangerous action, it's going to still keep on going. So I will say just pick one of these two if you're going to pick a route. So I'm going to take automatically approve, and I'm going to click on enter. And then we're basically just going to wait for its response to come in. All right, so along the way, as it's doing it, it's also going to be asking you some questions, right? So it sees that there's duplicate pairs and it's asking me what to do in those situations. In my case, I'll just say keep one, leave the duplicate behind. You can see, what about that PDF? Like, what do we do with it? And in my case, I'm just going to put it in the miscellaneous folder, right? And so once I answer those questions, you're going to see it's going to continue on with its work. So those situations might happen to you depending on how you set up your instructions or your prompt. Okay, so it looks like it has completed. So what we can do now is we can go back into our home inside here. And now I'm going to click on this and let's see. Oh, it's so much more easier to read. You can see over here that now it basically took those different types of files and categorized them into different types of folders. And so, yeah, this is pretty impressive that it was able to clean this up. You can imagine what other type of folders it can clean in your own computer as well, too. But here's the thing, right? Like the thing is that if I were to even still give this folder to somebody or to Claude, right? That means it's still going to need to go through each of the folders and read the files in order to understand the full context. So what I can do is I can actually put a file at the root of this type of folder or at the top of this folder, which basically describes about what this folder is, what are each of these folders for, in order to make it easier to navigate. And that's where the Claude.md file comes in. Okay, so let's make this Claude.md file. So if you're curious about what an MD file is, it's just basically a markdown file. And the key idea is that it's very easy for Claude to basically read instructions from it. So what I'm going to do inside here is I'm going to copy and paste from my prompt guide, paste inside here, which again is in the video description. And it's basically saying it wants to create this Claude.md file, which is going to clearly break down what is exactly in this type of folder. Again, I'm going to keep with Sonnet 5 because it's not so complicated. In fact, I can even tone it down more, but we'll just keep it like this. This is going to take a few seconds, so I'll see you guys in a bit. Okay, so it has finally completed. So if we go back inside our Canvas and Co inside here, and I click on the file, you're going to now notice we have something called Claude.md. And so if I click on this Claude.md file, you can see that now it basically has an explanation of what exactly this folder is, what are the different types of folders in this folder, and it gives a little description about what is my preference for my file naming as well too, right? So it gives more information for Claude, so it doesn't have to go through the entire folders of files again. It could basically just read the Claude.md to get a better understanding of how to navigate this folder. I also want to add that this has additional benefits because it can help you save tokens. Because the thing is that if you didn't have that CloudMD, what will happen is it will dig through the entire folder file to get the entire context, and that does take tokens. But if you have a file that's at the root or at the top of that folder that describes where exactly everything is at, it makes it much more easier to navigate and get that information, which requires less tokens. All right, so if you ever have experience of making a doc, a sheet, maybe a dashboard or a small app, congrats, you basically have created something called an artifact. An artifact is whatever Claude has made inside its chat. And then you have something called a live artifact, which is basically a way to add live data to your artifact so it becomes more dynamic. And so what we're going to do is we are going to do that connections by using things called connectors. Connectors are basically these external apps that you can connect to your Claude. So things like your Google Drive, for example, right? And so we're going to connect our Google Drive to a dashboard artifact that we're going to make in order to create a live artifact. And it seems I have already spoiled myself, but yeah, as you can see over here, we're going to build a dashboard that is going to stay current. So it's going to take all of those cells that we did organize, and it's going to create a nice live dashboard connected to our Google Drive. Okay, so I am back into my Cloud desktop, and what I want to do is I want to consolidate all my cells into one file. So if we currently look in our folders and we look at the cells data, you're going to see we have all the cells for that year, and I just want to put that into one file. So I'm just going to copy and paste this prompt from my guide, and I'm just going to simply paste it here. And as I mentioned, it's going to look at the data folder, and it's basically going to combine it into one spreadsheet. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and since this might be a little bit more on the complicated side, just for safety, I'm going to set it to Opus. Oh, Opus 5. Actually, that just came out today. And I'm just going to click enter. Going to give this a few minutes to process. So again, as you're doing these things, and depending on how you set your instructions, you can see it's asking me some questions. I guess that was the only question. But yeah, as you go through it, they'll ask you more questions whenever it needs your opinion on them. Okay, so you can see that it has completed and it did pretty good. It was able to consolidate all of this into one file. Of course, you're going to need to double check this to be sure, but we're just going to make the assumption is true. But there is some techniques to just make sure you can spot check to make sure things are in place. So what I want to do now is I want to take this consolidated cells and I want to upload it to my Google Drive. So a connector, right? So as I mentioned, Claude has the ability to connect to external apps. So what you can do inside here is you can click on this plus sign, you can go over to connectors, and you can click on something called add connectors and browse connectors. So you can already see that there is a variety of connectors you can connect to, but in my case, I want to connect to my Google Drive. So I'm going to just simply click on Google Drive. I'm going to connect it, and it's just going to do this typical authentication process where it's going to need me to verify some information. In my case, I'm just going to go for the Stoic Programmer. I know this is not Canvas and Co, so I'm just using a random account for this. I'm going to continue, and I'm going to say, yes, I do want to give it access. And then it's just going to get me back into that Claude after I give it that permission. All right, so now that we're actually back inside here, okay, so you can see it has connected to our Google Drive. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply just download. Actually, I'm just going to download the file just to show you guys that it is local. So if I go inside to my Canvas and Co, and I go over to here and I go to my cells data, you're going to see the combined files located in here. So if you want to access that, you could just simply click on this folder. Oops, sorry, not that folder. This folder right here in the top corner. It's going to open your Explorer, and that's going to allow me to go inside here. So I'm just going to simply click on my demo folder. I'm going to go over to my cells data, and I'm going to take this combine. And you can see inside here that in my Google Drive, I basically already have a folder prepared for this. So I'm just going to simply go inside here, and I'm just going to drag it inside. Okay, and then you can see it has popped up inside there. All right, so now that I basically have it inside here now what I want to do is I want to create a live artifact where I want to basically have this dashboard be connected to this Excel sheet that's located on the Google Drive. So whenever I do changes to that cells, it's also going to update as well too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my prompt guide again, and I'm just going to copy and paste it. And so now if I go back into my Claude, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, like, I put the consolidated cell sheet in my Google Drive. I basically want you to build me a live dashboard based on all of those different types of consolidated cell sheets. Okay. And so basically, I also added some functionality where there's a picker where I can pick the different months so I can see all the different information in a much nicer interface. Okay. And so because this is going to be a little bit more complicated to build because it is doing a lot of connections, I'm just going to use Opus 5. Oh, and I think one more thing too, while we're doing that, we also want to make sure that I know this is security purposes, but just for our case, right? We want to make sure also that we share this publicly as well too, so it'd be easy for it to access. So just make sure that you keep that as share. So now when I go back into my Claude and I click enter, it's still going to do that work and make all those connections and build that artifact. So I'll see you guys in a minute when this thing is finished processing. Okay, so as usual, it's going to ask me some questions. So it gives me some recommendations of how I should treat it. And I want this to be daily revenue trend. Okay, so it has finished creating our artifact. And I have to say, like, this is like the nicest artifact it has actually made for me. Like the previous demos I did, it didn't look this nice. So I'm quite impressed of it. So you can see over here that you can drop down and pick between the different types of months. And you can clearly see that its source data is from that Excel sheet from our Google Drive. So I was going to show you the live artifacts, but this is a good reason why we should double check the results from Claude because you could see it set my quantity as dollar signs, and I think it's causing some weird bugs in my live artifacts. So let me just fix that real quick, and then I'll show you guys this. Okay, so welcome back. You can see that now the quantity are finally working and the revenue has this dollar sign, and you can see that I have overblowed the quantity just to prove my point that as I update the spreadsheet, this will also update as well too. It may take some time, but this thing is a live artifact, so it will update after a few seconds or a minute. Okay, so we're at our final task, but we're going to take these annoying reports that we have to write monthly and see how we can automate some aspects of that with skills. Okay, so we basically create a new chat. If you haven't had the chance, if you looked at their monthly reports, they all look relatively the same. They basically look like this, the same design, except they have the different revenue, units sold, orders, and month-to-month growth for that specific month. And so there's a lot of repetitive things that can be automated. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to copy and paste this prompt I have here, and I'm just going to simply paste it. All it's simply saying is it's going to look at my Excel sheet, look at the previous report, and just recreate that type of report. So we're making another artifact. And yeah, because this is interacting with various different types of files, I'm just going to keep it with Opus. So I'm going to run this and I'll see you guys in a minute. All right, so it did a pretty good job. You can see it was able to get the same exact design and it was able to update the numbers. Of course, you would need to double check that, but I don't have to go through the entire design of it again. And so basically, this is fantastic. We have something that can, or a prompt that could basically generate these type of reports. But the thing is, I don't want to remember that entire prompt again, right? I just want to be able to get like a certain keyword, like something like monthly report that automatically understands that it needs to make that report for that month. And so what I can do is create a skill, which basically takes these very long, repetitive type of instructions and makes them into these nice keyword repeatable workflows. So what I can do inside here is I can just simply go inside and say, hey, can you turn this into a reusable skill called monthly reports so I can make the same report for any months? So now what's going to happen is once I click enter, it's basically going to formulate this type of skill. And so now what's going to happen later on is I could just simply go over and type monthly report and run that, and I won't have to remember the entire prompt. It's going to remember all that detailed instructions in order to basically recreate those type of reports. And you can see that it is giving me some instructions. So I'm just going to say recommended for all of it. And it's also going to be testing some examples as well too. So it's really important that you test your skill or have Claude help you test the skills and verify those changes. All right, so we have finished the skills now. So now, after we made those skills, it can basically remember that prompt that we have made to make those monthly reports, and we could just reference it by keyword. So I'm going to save the skill. Because I already saved it, I'm just going to upload and replace it again. But you can see over here now, I could just simply say /monthly reports, and it's going to basically pop up now. So anytime I want to write a report for that specific month, I could just simply say this, and it's going to write it for me. So what I'm going to simply say here is monthly reports, click enter. And then basically what's going to be happening is it's going to be asking me these questions. All right, so you can see over here that after running that type of skill, you can see immediately it's going to be asking me some questions, right? So, like, what type of month do I want to write this report? And so, in my case, I'm going to do July, but you already know how that process works. The key idea is this is that if there is like this really repeatable step by step instruction, you can make that to a repeatable workflow through skills. Okay, so I want to end it with schedules. So, if there's something that you do on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis and it's super repetitive, schedules can be very useful. So, in our case, because we have to write like this monthly report, well, why don't we run a schedule that runs that skill that helps us run that type of report? And that's going to help us automate a lot of this type of process of the reports. Alrighty, so now that we know we have this monthly skill right here, what I want to do is I want to genuinely run a schedule to run this monthly. So I'm going to copy and paste this prompt in the guide. And all I'm going to say is set up a schedule that runs the monthly report skill on the first of every month. And that's pretty much it. So I'm just going to simply click start task. And it's a pretty broad request, but I also want to do this purposely because I want to show you how basically Claude is going to ask a lot of clarifying questions to make sure it understands what job needs to get done. So you can immediately see it asks my first question, which is going to be A&M. Okay, so I thought it was going to ask me more questions, but it looks like it's already done. So basically, for what I'm reading inside here, what it's going to be doing is it's going to run that schedule at 8 a.m. and it's going to save it locally on my device. And I'm just going to simply schedule it like so. And then you can see it has already completed. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is if I want to be able to test that, I can go to my schedule, or I guess I can even go back inside here. And you can see that our schedule is saved in the corner. So I can technically click on this and I can actually run it now to verify whether or not it's able to do that. Typically, whenever you do your schedule before you make it really active, you will want to test it. So in my case, I can actually view and see if whether or not it's able to do those changes successfully. So I completely forgot that June has already been created. So what I'm going to simply do is I'm just going to go back inside here and I am just going to delete that file so we can actually verify the changes completely. So I'm just going to go over to my monthly reports, delete this, and then we're going to try this one more time. So it's simple as just going back inside to our schedule again, which you can also find in here. You can go to your schedules and you're going to see our schedule is located here. And I could just run this now again. And let's see if it's able to do those changes successfully. All right, so after a minute, we are going to see if our report went out well. And so if I were to click on this right here, you can see that we were able to create our report for June. There you go. And so, yes, of course, we actually ran this like now, but basically from now on, what's going to be happening from August 1st to 8:01 a.m., the next run is going to basically run the report for July and so on. All right, so congrats to making it to the end. So what we were able to build is we were taking that messy folder, we organized it, and we were able to create a live dashboard from our drive. And we were able to actually help automate our report by creating a skill and creating a schedule on top of that. So yeah, just grab the starter folder. It's in the video description. Try it for yourself. And I wish you best of luck in playing Cloud Cowork. Okay, so welcome to this practical tutorial to Cloud Code, where it's going to be a very hands-on experience where you're going to essentially go through a demo company called Canvas and Co, which is this small art print shop, and our goal is to essentially build a website for them. But along the ways, we're going to learn a lot of important concepts in Cloud Code, such as permission modes, Cloud MDs in the cloud.cloud folder, MCP skills and sub-agents, deployments, and then finally routines. And so all you're going to need to make sure you have is the Cloud Desktop app, because that's what we're going to be using with a Pro plan. And then everything we're going to be using from the files and the folders and the prompts are going to be located in the worksheet. Cool. I will see you guys in the next one. So I want to talk about what exactly is the difference with chat, cowork, and code. So a lot of us have experience of using Cloud Chat where we bounce ideas, we ask it questions, and maybe we have made it do some document creation and made some apps. And Cloud Chat is fantastic, but the thing is, it's very constrained inside its own chat box, meaning that if you do create something, you still have to download it and import it somewhere, similar to the apps, and very likely you might need to even just copy and paste things. So when it comes to actually working with a lot of local files, Cloud Chat is not the best solution. Rather, that's why they created Cowork and Code, which allows you to directly work with your local files. So for example, Cloud Cowork allows you to read across your documents, do knowledge work right where your files are located at. Cloud Code basically allows you to read across your code base, write your terminals, and just write and edit where your code is located at. And it's like vice versa, right? Cloud Cowork can also code as well too, and Cloud Code can also just move your documents around, which begs the question, how exactly are they different? And the thing is, they're not different because of their capabilities. They're different because of their interface, right? Cowork was meant for non technical folks. They wanted to build an interface that didn't have these complicated terminals or code. They just simply wanted to describe a task like a normal chat. And then you got Cloud Code over here, which used to be very intimidating, used to just be a terminal, but now they have a desktop app. So even though it was more geared for technical folks, it had the capability to do more, right? You can see over here that we have like a terminal that can be added inside there. So yeah, it's not the capability, it's just more of the interface for the different types of audiences. Okay, so currently I'm inside my Claude desktop and I want to go over to my Cloud Code. Now, if this is your first time going to Cloud Code, you're going to find a scary error. If I go inside there, it's going to immediately spit out install Git. And then you're also going to see it says Git is required for a local session. Okay, so first of all, what exactly is Git? Git is what we call a version control software, which is just a fancy way of saying that it is a software that just tracks all your changes to your files over time. And so the main reason why this is super important for Cloud Code is that Cloud Code, while it has access to your local files, has a lot of power and it might actually do changes that you might not want. And so Git kind of almost acts like a safeguard where it's tracking all your changes. So if Cloud Code does something that you don't want to do, you could always revert back to that original position. So you can see over here that we went to version 3, but we can revert back in case version 3 was actually a mistake. Okay, so we're back here. So what we're going to just simply do to resolve this is you can download the Git right here, and it's just going to automatically open this link for you to access. And all I'm going to simply do, because I'm in Windows, it depends on what device you have. I'm going to just download for the Windows device. And it does take some time. I'm just going to simply open this up. And then I am just going to just go for all the defaults. Normally, you want to be careful what you read, but because this is a tutorial, yes, anyway, because I already have installed. So I'm just going to keep on going with all the default values. Just going to install it. I will come back to you guys when this thing finishes. I get just finished installing. I just want to let you know that you guys might get this message where you might have to restart your computer. So go ahead and do that. Okay, so after restarting, I'm back into my Claude desktop and you can see over here that I no longer get this error anymore. So maybe some of you guys might still face that error. So I'll just provide a link to a video that's going to help you with that process of getting Git installed. And so also, if you haven't had the chance yet, make sure you go to the description of this video, download the project folder. I'm going to be using Canvas Co-Starter, which is what we're going to be using to build the company's website. So one of the things I want to bring up is as you kind of start working of this, you're going to notice this thing called auto, right? So you have your chat box, you have your models that you can pick. In my case, I'm just going to be using Sonnet 5 throughout. And you see over here that we have all these different types of permissions. Like, what are all of these things in the first place? So what you were just looking at was something called permission modes. And so the thing with Cloud Code is that it has all this access to your local computer more than your chat. So we need to have these different modes to determine how much oversight Claude has before acting on our machine. So for example, for ask permission, anytime Claude wants to do an action, it has to ask you permission. Plan mode, on the other hand, is more of like it can't do any action. It's only meant there to talk to you and to plan and to maybe explore, right? Then you have this thing called bypass permission, which is like you just give it full on control over your computer. Like it doesn't ask you for permission, it doesn't look for anything for safety checks, it just goes full on fire. Auto mode is similar to bypass permission, except it does have a safety check. So the thing about auto mode is that it's going to basically do different actions, but it actually has a way to evaluate the safety of that action. If it determines it too dangerous, it's going to ask you for permission. And then accept edit is basically a way for you to, it has like some access to do some edits and change, but for the most part, it's going to ask you a lot of permissions for different types of things. So it's like a much more flexible ask permission. Okay, so now that we have a better understanding of permission modes, my recommendation is that anytime you're going to build something or do something, start with plan mode, right? If it's super simple, you don't need to use plan mode. But if you're needing to think about it or you need to build something, start with plan mode because with plan mode, it prevents Claude from doing any action. It's meant to be a space where you can have conversation with Claude, ask clarifying questions. And by the end of the conversation, you guys are going to understand each other And it's going to essentially create a whole plan that you can actually read and update to make sure that you guys are on the same page. So, for example, right, I'm going to go over to my plan mode and I'm just going to ask it a question. So, I'm going to go to my worksheet guide, just copy and paste this prompt. And I'm just going to tell it this. So inside my Canvas co-starter it has has all of these different files that you see over there. And basically what I'm telling it is I wanted to draft a simple homepage for the shop as a static site. So I'm just going to click enter and you're going to see that it is not going to do any action. It's basically just going to do exploration and it's going to do some planning. So this is going to take some time. So I will see you guys soon. Okay, so it finishes planning. It didn't actually give me clarifying questions, which is unusual, but sometimes it will do that. But you can see over here that it did exploration and it just created a plan for me. It gave me a plan of what exactly it's planning to do. And what I can do is I could just quickly read it. And if there's some parts that I don't agree with, I could just simply revise that plan and bounce more ideas with it or have it ask me clarifying questions. So in my case, the plan looks perfectly fine to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to auto mode. So again, the thing about auto mode is that it's similar to bypass permission, except it has a way to check the safety of a certain action that's going to be taken. And so if it does deemed a action to be very dangerous, then it's going to ask me for permission. It's going to take some time. So I'll see you guys in a bit. Okay, so I'm back here and you can see it has finally finished building. So what happened in the last session is I went over to my plans, it implemented that plan, and then it essentially went over that plan to build this application. And so in case you didn't know, if you want to run it, you basically just need to run this right here. And then you can actually click on run, and then you'll be able to get the web application to run inside there. So pretty simple. So yeah, pretty good for a one shot. So the big idea that I want you to get from this is that anytime you're building something where you require some thinking or something that is a complex feature, start with plan mode. And once you have that plan established, then you can go on to these other modes to actually building it. Okay, so I'm going to shrink this really quick and I want to show you this thing that you're going to see in the corner. So if I click on this, you're going to see that this actually has something called context window. Okay, so what is the context window? The context window is simply the size limit and how much information the AI can actually hold and process information. So an analogy could be like, as a human, if you have too much things in your brain, it's going to be very hard for you to act on them. And so you can see over here that inside that chatbot over here, right, there is tons of different types of context. There's not only our conversation, but there's also the files that we have created. There's also the tools that we have imported, right? And so, you need to really watch out for your context window because if it goes to that limit, it just starts sounding really weird and it doesn't give much very useful responses. And so some ways to actually check on that, besides clicking on that blue circle that we just did, you can write this command called slash context. And so what slash context does is it basically allows you to check, how is your context window doing? And then there's actually two really good commands that you can utilize in order to maintain that type of context. The first one is compact. What compact does is that let's say that you're in this conversation and you need to continue that, but all the conversation above is very important to continue, but your context is getting tight. Well, what you can do is you can run a slash compact, which is essentially a way for you to summarize your entire conversation. It's going to lose some details, but it's going to summarize that conversation so you can actually still use that for the next task that you're going to do. But let's say that all the previous conversation just doesn't matter for the next task you're going to do. You could just simply run slash clear, which is going to wipe the entire conversation. It's going to actually be a lot more light and a lot more quicker in order to actually do tasks for you because it doesn't have all that previous context to hold on. So yeah, just remember that there are these three commands that can really help you manage this type of context window. So just to continue what we just learned, so besides of just clicking the button and just seeing our context window from here, right? What I can do here is I could just simply say slash context. And then you can see over here that if I click enter, it's going to basically talk about what my context window is. And you can see it's not just our conversations, but it's also the tools that we imported along with the skills as well too, and the the MCP tools inside there. And so let's say that, we have this context that's super high, like somewhere in the 80% range, right? And we need the context above in order to continue our conversation. When it comes down to that type of situation, what you can use is something called slash compact. And what slash compact does, and I'm not going to run it, but basically it's going to take your previous conversation, it's going to basically compact it, right? And so it is going to lose some details, but at least it's going to still understand the rough like context of what it had previously to help you with your next task, right? Given that very tight context window. But the other thing, as I mentioned, is just simply doing slash clean or sorry, slash clear. And what slash clear does is like if the previous conversation is not going to be helpful for the next task I'm going to do, then I'm just going to clear it off. So you can see over here that in my case, I don't need it for the next task. If I say slash clear, you can see that this thing becomes back into 0. Yeah, as you're working, you want to make sure that you keep track of your context window with those 3 types of commands. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the files that you're going to likely engage with when you're using Claude. And that file type is most likely going to be a markdown. So a markdown is just simply a plain text that has a very light structure to it. And the main reason why it's used to write instructions for Claude is because it's extremely lightweight and it's easy to read. So like one of the markdowns that you're going to likely engage with is something called a Claude MD. So a Claude MD is basically a way to describe a project folder, right? It basically gives an idea of what this whole entire project is about, the convention, and it helps summarizes it inside a Claude MD. So the next time Claude engages with your project, it can look at the Claude MD to make it easier for it to navigate what your project is about and how to actually use it. Um, and besides the Claude MD, right, there's also a folder that's called .claude. And basically what this folder does over here is it's a way to hold all of your project configurations. So any type of configurations or rules or skills that you're trying to save locally to this project, you will want to store it into your .claude, and it just keeps things a lot more cleaner. But we'll talk about how we could actually implement that in the next one. Okay, so we're back inside our clean slate environment. So basically, I want to talk about how we can apply what we just learned with those markdowns. So I'm going to go over to the files, and you're going to immediately see that there's a lot of things that you don't recognize. Like you don't know the testimony, you don't know the company, right? We were building something, we didn't understand the folder structure. And so basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run something called slash init. What slash init does is it's basically a command where it's going to let Claude analyze my entire folder, the files, and basically write a overall summary of what this project is about, its conventions, and basically an easier way to just overall navigate it. So that means whenever Claude does go back into this project, it doesn't have to reread all the folders and files. It can just look at the Claude MD to better understand where everything's at and what is the purpose of this project so it can recollect his mind. See, it is going to take some time, so I will see you guys soon. Okay, so I actually complete that pretty quickly, so I'm gonna just see here. So you can see we have our Claude.md, and you can see over here that it says this file provides guidance to Cloud Code when working with the code in this repository. See, so it provides a guidance. It breaks down what exactly this structure is all about, all the different types of files, what are those files contained, and so on. And you're also going to notice that we have our .claude, right? This is basically where we're going to put in all of our project's configuration. So this is great. So we basically have a Claude.md, which is a way for us to understand what this project is about and for Claude to have an easier time navigating our project. So the other thing I want to do is I want to add a very specific styling to our website. So our website over here looks pretty nice, but let's say that Claude, not Claude, Canvas and Co. has a very specific way of how they want to style, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a markdown that is going to contain that type of styling. So I have this little command over here that is from the worksheet that I'm going to write down here. And it's going to say this. It says, help me create a markdown file called design.md that contains this design. So basically, this is a design that I want Canvas and Co to have. This is our typical branding. So I want to be able to maintain that with our website as well too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this run and just create our markdown. Okay, so you can see that it has created our design.md, so I can just X this out. I'm going to go over to my files, and you're going to quickly see that my design.md is located there. You might need to refresh just in case by just clicking the search, and you'll see it pop up. So you can see over here that our design.md contains all the styling that's going to maintain that branding style for Canvas and Co. And so I want to actually talk back into this idea of what this .cloud folder is. That .cloud folder is a way to store all of the project configurations. So basically, whenever Claude goes to your file, not only does it look into the Claude.md to get a understanding of the project, but it also goes into the .claude folder to find any convention or rules that it needs to follow. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to I'm going to do this manually. I could technically do it in the chat, but it's going to take some time. I'm going to go to .claude inside here, and I'm basically going to create a new folder that's going to be called rules. And all I'm going to simply do is I'm just going to take that design, the MD, and I'm just going to put it inside there. So I'm just going to copy this like so. I'm sure there's easier ways to do it. And then I'm just going to simply delete it from here. So what's going to basically happen is that anytime I'm going to have basically Claude do a certain of like build a feature inside this project, it's going to basically look at the .claude, it's going to look into the rules, and it's going to follow that convention of the design that I just set up, right? So let's actually test that right now. Actually, we can't test it because we initially started it by having the homepage build it in the style that we didn't set for our branding. So we do have to be a little explicit on that. So what I'm going to do inside here is I'm just going to be explicit. I'm just going to go here and say restyle the homepage based on, and so you can actually use the @ sign to target a folder. So I can say design the MD and add a catalog session, a grid of every product and product CSV with its image, name, category, and price. And again, remember, if we're doing a feature, I prefer to do this in plan mode. I'm just going to run this. And as I mentioned, the only reason why I'm referencing it right now is because I didn't restyle the homepage. But you can see over here that I don't have to reference it for this next part because it, for now on, is going to use that design, the MD. Gonna take some time, so I'll see you guys soon. Okay, so you can see our plan is out now. So if I go inside here, you can see we have our new plan inside. So I'm just gonna accept and run the auto mode. All right, so you can see that it has finished going through our plan and building it. So I'm just gonna simply run it. And you can see over here that we were able to have it follow our convention. So pretty nice inside there. And so, yeah, so now that we have these different files established, our markdowns, now whenever Cloud goes back into our project, it understands what the project is about, how to navigate it easier, and it also understands the convention it needs to follow as it goes through this project through our rules. All right, so I'll see you guys in the next one. Yeah, so what is an MCP? So MCP, which stands for Model Context Protocol, basically it's a fancy way to say that's a standard to let Claude connect to the tools that we use on a daily basis. So like having Claude have access to your Google Drive or your Slack or your Notions. A lot of you guys might recognize this as connectors. Now, the other thing to this is something called skills, which is another totally different concept, but they actually can go together quite nicely. But the thing about skills is that they're basically step-by-step instructions that Claude follows that basically work the same way every single time. So for example, like if one of the tasks I have to do on a daily basis is like formatting report, and I have like the same exact instruction and the same exact prompt that I have to copy and paste, it might be worth making that skill or making that instruction into a skill. So that way I could just call a command in order to run that type of step-by-step instruction. So what do I mean by that, right? Let's say that to format a report, you need to add a title and a summary, sort the section in order, apply the house styles. I can basically package it all up into a command. So whenever I call a command, it's just going to run all those step-by-step instructions. Okay, so the thing that I want to get at is that these tools actually work great together. Like they're different concepts, but they can work great together because the thing about MCP is that they give Claude access to a tool. While for skills, right, you could have it do these different types of prompt and instructions, but it also is a way to teach Claude how to use those tools really well. So you can have these MCP tools embedded into these skills. Okay, so we have a pretty nice looking website inside here, right? But the problem is that our website looks pretty generic compared to other people. And so we need to find a way in how we can set out for our competitors. And so one of the best ways to stand out is basically writing a why section into our page of why we are different from our competitors. And so we need to do a little bit of some research. We need to research into our top sales and some of the testimonies that we have received to see where we actually stand out from. So what I have over here inside my Cloud is I have this in my worksheet guide. I'm just going to copy this. Again, you can access this in the description. I actually have this prompt that says, read my latest sales and testimony in my Google Drive, find the top 4 products, blah, 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 right? But Remember we talked about MCPs? I want to basically access my Google Drive. Now, before I run that prompt, I need to make sure that I am connected to it. So you're going to go over to your connectors. You can see I already am connected, but let's imagine I wasn't. I'm going to go to my manage connectors, and you can immediately see all the different types of third-party tools I'm already having access to. And then if I want to access more, you can see I could just simply browse all like with all the tons of connectors that's out there. So if I went to Google Drive, you can see over here that I would actually have to click on connect because I already am connected. It says disconnect, and then you'll have to authenticate or connect your account to your cloud to your Google Drive so you can access it. So because I already have access to it, if I were to click on my Google Drive, you can see that I can give different permissions of what Claude can actually do, right? So in this case, I only gave access to list my recent files, and then it has to ask me permission for these other things to do. So now, because I have my connectors all set up, ready to go, I can just simply click enter and have this thing do some research for me. And so basically where this sales and testimony is actually coming from is that folder from here, right? So it's making that connection. So I'm going to give it some time. So I'll see you guys real soon. Oh, I also want to really mention this, by the way, that right now I'm connected to my Google Drive. But if you don't want to connect to a Google Drive, I do want to let you guys know that I do have the sales and testimonies already here. So you can run that same prompt, just leave off the Google Drive, and you guys will have the same effect as well, too. Okay, so you can see that our customer favorite stuff has finished. So I'm going to quickly refresh. And if you see, if I click on here, you're going to see we have a whole list of all of our different types of customers and all of our testimonies, right? Ready to be used. So we have a lot of valuable information we can use. Now, before we just decide to continue, because this is a prompt that we regularly use, it might be useful to actually make this into a skill. So what I have over here is a prompt that I'm just going to copy and paste down. And instead of me having to actually keep on remembering the skill and having to repeat it multiple times, I'm just going to make this into a local skill. Okay, so you can see now we have actually finished writing our skill. So if I go inside my skill, you're going to see that now I have something called customer favorite. So that means I no longer have to actually go in and have to remember the exact prompt. I could just simply go inside here and say slash customer favorite. Oops. Okay, well, let me clear this out really quick. Okay, I'm going to say slash customer favorite. And you're going to see that now we clear the context. It's going to remember that skill for the specific project and it's going to run it. So that means I don't have to remember running that prompt multiple times. I could basically just have it run as a command. And you can see it's mainly going to our MCP Google Drive, doing all that research, as you can see what we did inside here. So I'm not going to run this again because I already have the MD file inside here. So besides being able to collect our customers' testimonies and our best sellers, it's also important to also do some research over our competitive market as well too. So before we move on to the next session where we talk about sub agents, I'm just going to pre-prepare this. I'm also going to make another skill, which is going to be what we use for competitive research. So this is a skill, or this is a prompt that I use a lot whenever it comes down to competitive research. So I'm going to make this into a local skill so I don't have to keep on remembering this prompt like so. So I want to talk about sub agents, right? So some agents come from main agents, and the idea is that they basically can run in their own context window and basically do their own tasks and report back to the main agent. So what do I mean by that? Let's say that you're already in the flow of building something, and then you suddenly remember you have to do some sort of research, right? Some sort of information to get back to continue your building. So what you could do is you can basically stop your flow and just do the research in your main chat, but that means you have to wait. And also the thing about this research is that you only need it for one time. So having that inside your context kind of almost pollutes it. So it'd be a lot more effective if you actually had a sub agent where you could just create another agent to just do that task. That means that you can keep on working. And then when it finally gets all that information, it returns it back to you of the information that you do need. And so the formula to creating a good sub agent comes down to these three things: making sure that you create a clear description on the tasks it should handle, MCP connectors, basically what type of tools it has access to, and you can also give it access to certain skills on how it should engage with these instructions and with these MCP tools. Okay, so we're back here. So if you remember, we basically changed some of our instructions into skills, right? And I recently changed this competitive research into skill. Now, The main reason why we have these two different types of skills is because we need to gather our customer favorites in terms of their testimonies, and we need to do some competitive research so we can see how we can make an effective why statement inside our website. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run the competitive research, right? But let's say that basically I'm already in the flow and I'm already working a lot on building things and I just want this research to be done in the side, right? So what I can do, and I copy this prompt inside here, I could say create a sub agent with a web research access that runs on the competitive research skill, right? So basically this is the one that we have over here. So now if I were to click enter, what's basically going to happen is it's going to generate another agent from this main chat. Here you see it says running agent. And then basically what this main agent is going to do is do its own research, right? And then once it actually gets that all settled down, I can basically continue on working. So you can see here, right? Now I can keep on working. And basically if I click on this, you can see that this thing is running in the background. If you want to see all the sub agents working in the background, you could just simply click here and background task. Oh, I guess that's what it was. And you can see that our competitive research skill agent is basically running that task. And so now I can do some other task. So let's say again that I need to run that other skill, right? Then I could just simply go inside here and say slash customer favorite, right? So I run that skill that I have inside my local. And so now you can see I'm running two things at the same time. So the sub agent's doing research. I can continue to do my work to basically find what my customer favorites are. Okay, so you can see that our sub agent has completed. So if you go over to our competitive research, you can see that what the skill does is that it basically creates a competitive research.md. And so you can see indeed it was able to produce that. Actually, I need to refresh it. Competitor research.md. You can see it did all the research for a lot of our competitors inside there. All right, looking great. Now, I also want to mention that you can also put sub agents inside Claude as well too. So remember how I said to create a sub agent, you need to have a good description, the tools it's going to use, along with basically what skills it has access to, right? I'm not going to go so deep into that, but I just want to let you know that besides just spinning up sub agents inside here, you can also have them inside the .claude, where basically whenever .claude recognizes a situation where we might need a sub agent, they could just basically spin them up from here. Okay. So now that we basically have, and I'm just going to stop this because I was just doing this for demonstration to run this skill. Now that we basically have both of our stuff, we have the competitive research and we have the customer favorites. Now we can basically run our last prompt inside here, which is going to create our Y page. So I have over here, write a Y canvas and co for our homepage, lead with the position from our competitive research.md. So remember, you could target it. And then basically, I'm going to target our customer favorite MD as well too. There we go. And now it's going to basically do those changes. And remember, because I'm doing a feature change, I'm just going to do this in plan mode. And once it finishes its plan and I agree with it, I'm going to have it finally build. Okay, so you can see that it has finished creating its plan over here. So I could just have a look at it. And assuming that it's all good to go, then I'm just going to accept and do my auto mode. So again, plan it, revise it, and then finally implement your execution plan for that. Okay, so we finished building our Y section. I have to admit, it doesn't look that great. But you can see over here that it was able to take a combination of our competitive research along with what our customer liked, and it crafted that Y segment based on that. And of course, you can always go into Claude and ask it to revise some certain styles or components of it, but we're not going to worry too much about it now. We basically have our Y section. Okay, cool. So we basically have our website. And so the next step is we're going to deploy it now. Okay, so if we remember, we had to get basically that saved all of our work on our computer, but that's the thing, it was only on our local computer. So now what we need to do is we need to connect to a service called GitHub where we can push all of our changes into a centralized code base. And once we have that established, we can use one of GitHub's feature called GitHub Pages in order to publish our code base into a website. Let's see how those steps go. Okay, so let's get started with this. So we are going to first open up a file, and then you're going to notice that I have something called Git sub guide. So I built this specifically for this moment. and it has all the instructions on how to set Git in GitHub. So we already have installed Git when we got started with this. And so the next thing I want to do is install something called uh, GitHub CLI. Now, if you haven't yet, make sure that you create a GitHub account. It's free to do. So you can see, for example, that I already have access to my GitHub account inside here, like so. So make sure you make a GitHub account. And then what we're going to do is we're going to connect to a GitHub CLI. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up a terminal, right? I know this looks a little bit scary. I'm going to X all this out so it doesn't look too as intimidating. And I'm just going to copy some of the codes down. Now, what you could do is you go to Claude and basically tell it to help you guide you through the process. But since I already have a guide here, we could just use this. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm just going to paste it like so. And it's basically going to download the GitHub CLI. It's going to make it a lot more easier to push your code up to GitHub. Okay, that looks good inside there. It's probably because I already have installed. And so once I have that all completed, then I can basically run gh auth login. So once you do install it, it's important that you basically refresh and exit out. So I'm going to do this. Oh yeah, here it is. Exit. So it's kind of our way to kind of refresh the page, right? Once you install something with the terminal. So when I basically go back to here, after this thing finishes loading, okay, so I'm going to go back here. And then now I can run that command. I'm going to say GitHub auth login. So I'm going to log in with my github.com. I'm going to just use HTTPS. I'm going to use credential yes. I'm going to log in with a web browser. And then basically you're going to see that it's going to tell me to log in by clicking enter. So I'm going to click enter. And then I'm going to go in and copy this really quick. Copy. And you're going to see that we have access to my account right here, like so. So I'm basically going to, in my case, I'm going to connect to Kosuton, actually, a different account. Then I'm going to paste my code inside here, and I'm going to authorize and make that connection, and you're going to see that it's able to do that. All right, so I'm all set and ready to go. And that's pretty much it. So now all I have to do now is now that I have my Git and GitHub CLI all prepped up and ready to go, and now I can finally talk to Claude and just have it guide me through that process. So I have a little simple prompt that I'm going to use here. And all I'm going to simply say is push my code up to GitHub page, which is basically the place where we're going to make that into our code base into a website, and then return me a live link, and make sure not to push the sales and testimony data because those are private data. So I'm just going to simply run it like so. And so this is actually going to be taking some time. So I'll get back to you guys once this thing finished loading. Okay, so I just want to show this because it's asking me some questions. So I just want to show you that sometimes you're going to need to go in and set this thing up, which is going to become part of the live URL. I'm going to set it for this one, excluded too. All right. All right, so after asking, I think that was the only time I asked it to ask me questions, right? But now you can see now it gives me access to my repo. So now you can see the code is located inside my GitHub. It's now in a centralized place. And then you can see also over here that the site is live. So if I were to click on this, you can see now our website is live and ready to go. Ugh, okay, this voice section doesn't look that great. We need to change that later. But you can see overall, though, that we were able to kind of get our website published and ready to go. Okay, so I want to talk about routines. If you ever had experience of using schedules, like let's say you use schedules in Cowork, you're going to find that those schedules have to work locally on your computer. But the thing about routines, though, is that you can schedule tasks that basically can still work even if your computer's off. And the main reason for that is because it basically runs on Anthropic's like cloud server instead. So that's why it's able to actually run continuously without your computer having to be on. And so very likewise with schedulers, there's a trigger, and then basically the cloud code is going to run the task. And so again, there's like the local option, which runs on your machine, which is what we're used to. But the one that we're going to be doing is going to basically run on an Anthropic server. And it's basically going to still trigger even though our laptop is off. And then basically what's going to happen is that this cloud stuff is going to be using our GitHub repo that we basically just deployed. So the code that we just deployed into GitHub, we're basically going to have Anthropic is going to take that entire code base and it's going to run it on its own machine in order to run all of those different types of skills that we actually have, which I'll show you in a moment what that's going to look like. Okay, so I want to briefly talk about routines. I know we talked about it, but I want to talk about why it's important for us to put this into a GitHub, centralized GitHub repository, right? Why is it important for us to do this if we want to basically use routines or to run our stuff on the cloud? Well, the thing is, the reason why schedulers work locally is because our computer on, it contains the code, and our computer is the one that's running the code. But if our computer is off and it contains the code, well, then there's no way for that type of report or that schedule to actually run, right? So basically, because Anthropic servers are the ones that are going to be doing the running, we need to give it access to our code that contains all of that skills and data, right? So for example, right, one of the routines that I want to make is I want to be able to remember that research we did where we had to research all of the customers' favorites. And then we also did some sort of competitive research. And then we combined both of those reports together to come out with the Y section, right? And if you look into our Claude, you're going to see that our skills are inside there, right? So that means Anthropic is going to be able to select my code, or it's going to download my code and it's going to be able to properly run those type of skills. So I don't want to take you through the entire process of it, right? You can find routines inside here, and then you can create your own routine in the cloud, like so. And you can see that you're going to be able to select your repository where that code is located at. Um, but I already created it, so you don't have to go through all the obstacles in the beginning. So you can see over here what happens is that I created some instructions where I basically want this thing to run, where it's going to be running my two skills. It's going to connect to my Google Drive. So you can see I have a connector to it. It's going to run this at a weekly basis, and it's basically going to write a report for me. So you can see in 803 that indeed it was able to write a new Google Docs for me that I could basically use for my research. And you can see it was able to find my competitors, and it was also able to combine our testimonies as well too. What was the favorites? That's basically what routines are, a way for you to run things without your computer necessarily having to be on. All right, welcome to the end of this. Yeah, so this tutorial took a little longer than expected, but we covered a lot of things, right? We talked about things like permission modes, most importantly, this idea of just using plan mode and then finally using that to execute based on that plan. We talked about how we can structure our folders and files, how the Cloud MD makes it easier for Cloud to navigate your projects, and how you can put all your project configuration in the .Cloud. We talked about ways on how we can combine our MCPs and skills and sub agents together. We talked about how we can actually deploy to GitHub and to eventually GitHub pages. And then we talked about how we can use routines where we can connect to our GitHub repository in order to run these type of schedules or tasks without our computer necessarily being on. So anyway, it was really nice to have you guys here. Congratulations to making the end, and I wish you have a good time playing with Cloud Code. Okay, so welcome to this practical guide on using any with Claude. We're going to talk about how we can build these automations by describing them. It's also going to be a hands-on guide because everything we're going to be using is going to be in the video description, which you can download and follow along with us. So for us to understand this entire concept of using any with Claude, we're going to be using a fake demo company called Canvas & Co. Now, Canvas & Co. is a small art studio located in Portland. And the thing about their situation is that they have this inbox that's never ending. They have sales, question, thank you emails. And in each of those emails, they basically have to read and sort them by hand. And so we're going to see how any could help with that process. And so by the end of this, we're going to find ways to make that email automatically greet the users, remember them by updating our CRM. We're going to talk about how each of those emails will be categorized into their sales, support, or general categories. And we're also going to be using that AI agent to help basically create short summaries for each of those emails and drop them inside our Google Sheet. So the plan overall is this. We're going to talk about why NAN in the first place and when not to use it. We're going to talk about the setup process. We're going to do our first build. We're going to talk about what happens when errors do show up and what does that look like. And then we're going to focus on our last build, and then we'll reach to the end of this. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one.
Okay, so why will we even consider using NAN? And it just really comes down to the amount of risk that you're working with. The thing about NAN, way before this AI boom, NAN's purpose was to take these repeatable process and make them into these predictable workflows. And I say predictable because if you're somebody that was using customer data or customers' monies or these real sensitive emails, there was a lot of risk that was involved in those processes. So you need to make sure that the task being done was done in a very, very specific way. It was being done correctly consistently. Now, the thing about these autonomous AI agents, on the other hand, and I'm talking about things like Cloud Schedule, Cloud Routines. You could most definitely use them. They're very flexible, but they're also less predictable because even if you're able to give them all the different steps to getting a job done, well, the thing about them is that they're still making decisions and judgments for each of those different steps, and those different decisions could deviate from what you actually want to get done, right? And so I'm just trying to say that these autonomous AI agents are better when it comes down to these subjective type of situations. So I'm not saying that these things are against each other, right? In fact, quite the opposite. They're very complementary of each other. So whenever you're working with a high risk situation that requires predictability, you will want to use NAN. But when it comes to situations where things are a little bit more subjective, right, and they're kind of more low risk, for example, you might want to use an autonomous AI agent. So the way how they could be complementary is that NAN can use these AI agents to make these type of subjective decisions in these very controlled type of environment to minimize those risks. So whenever you're deciding to use NAN or these autonomous AI agents, just think about the risk that is involved in the process. Okay, so just some prerequisites. There's going to be two things you're going to need. The first one is we are going to be using Cloud Desktop, specifically Cloud Cowork for the desktop. So make sure you have that set up. And then also you're going to need to have an NAN account. So just make sure you make one. It's free to start. And the way how we're going to connect them is through some sort of connector, an NAN connector, which is going to allow us to build these workflows on Claude. Okay, so I'm going to quickly talk about the setup process. If you haven't had the chance, make sure you download the folder and files in the video description so you can follow along with us. So I'm inside my Cloud desktop. I'm going to go over to Cowork, going to create a new project. And inside this project, I am just going to import that folder that I have downloaded in the video description. And then I'll just give it the default name like so. It could be whatever you want. And inside here, if you look inside the folders, you're going to notice three things, right? It's going to contain information about the business itself to give the AI agent more context of what we are. And then you're also going to see this little Excel sheet. And this is what we're going to be uploading to Google Drive, which is going to contain all of our clients' data. And it's also going to be used to help us populate our leads and support sheets as well, too. All right, so that's pretty much the Cloud Cowork side. Now, for the NA side, you want to make sure that you create a free account. There's a free trial for 14 days. And when you do create that account, right, you're going to see this homepage inside here. It's not going to look like this because I played around with quite a few bit inside here, but you're going to notice a section called settings. You're going to go to your settings, and then you're going to see something called instant level MCP, right? So the interface might be different, but just look out for something called MCP. And then you're going to see something called connection details, which is going to contain that server URL. So you're going to copy that. And now we're going to be using that to help us connect to our Claude. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our customize. We're going to go over to our connectors. And then I'm just going to be searching for NAN connector. I'm going to simply add it, and you're going to immediately see it's going to tell me to paste the server URL inside here, which is what I'm going to do. And then when I click on continue, it's going to make that connection. And basically what's happening is it's just going to ask me permissions to what exactly it has access to do what exactly. And so when I have this thing open up, and hopefully it speeds up a little bit faster, it is taking its sweet time. And then you can see it says, I trust this URL, so I'm going to allow it. And then basically it's just going to redirect me back into the NA8 so we can actually start doing our thing. Or sorry, redirect back into the Claude. Okay, like so. Pretty much it. So now you can see we have granted access. So now our Claude is connected to our NA8. So we're going to be able to create our workflows inside Claude now. All right, so in the next one, we're going to start building something. Okay, so we're going to be working on our first workflow. And so what's going to happen is that whenever somebody emails Canvas & Co., it's going to check them against our contact list or our CRM sheet, and it's going to see whether or not this person is new or existing. If the person is new, they're going to get a warm welcome email, and they're also going to be added into our contact list. If there's somebody that is a returning person, then we're going to just simply give them a message like, good to hear from you again, right? So we're going to be able to kind of logically change those messages depending if this person is new or existing already. Okay, so we're going to be looking at a quick flow chart just to kind of have a high overview. But basically what happens is we're going to get the email, and then we're going to extract the senders and emails messages. And then we're going to check whether or not they already exist on our CRM, which in this case is just going to be a Google Sheet. If yes, then we're going to add a CRM row and then send them a warm welcome. If they are returning, then we're just going to update the row and then send them a good to hear from you again type of email. All right, so we're going to start building. So the first two things we need to do is we need to give NAN access to our Gmail and our Google Sheets. So I'm going to go back into my workflow, back into the dashboard, and you're going to see a section called credentials. In credentials, I'm going to search for Gmail, and I'm just going to give it permission to access one of my Gmail accounts. I don't have a Canvas and Co email, so in my case, I'm just going to use my Stoic Programmer one. And then I'm just going to simply say continue. So it already has access to some of the things it has permission to do, right? So you need to give it that access as well too. And then I am going to create credentials for Sheet, and I'm going to continue on. And I'm also going to do the same process by basically using that same account, right? So just for a starting point, just make sure you give it just access to just being able to edit your Google Sheet files and send Gmail accounts if you can do that. All right, so now we basically gave it some credentials. So now it'll be able to act on our part. So the next thing is, if you remember inside our Claude Cowork, the thing that we downloaded, we had this thing called Canvas Co CRM Starter. So you're going to take this this file inside here and you're going to upload it to your Google Sheets. So in my case, I have already done that. You can see that I uploaded that file up into that same Stoic Programmer account, and it contains, the CRM sheet, the lease sheet, and the support sheet, like so. Okay, so you can see that we have everything set up. So all I need to do now is I just need to have a nice prompt inside my Cloud Cowork, and we're going to see this thing be built. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to my Cloud Cowork, and you can already see that I put the prompt inside here already. And maybe I can make this a little smaller so you guys can read all of it. But basically what it says here is that I wanted to build me an NA8 workflow. And by the way, you can copy and paste this from the guide that's under the video description. But I said, build me an NA8 workflow, keep it deterministic, no AI, right? So every email I wanted to trigger whenever a new email arrives. And it's basically going to look at my Google Sheet CRM. And it says to paste your Google Sheet link. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go back, going to go over to, share actually, copy the link. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to paste it inside here, right? So I want them to look up into my Google Sheet CRM, then check, are they already in the sheet? If they're new, then we're going to do an adding of the row and sending that warm welcome email. And if they are returning, then we're basically just going to update the row and then send them a different type of message, right? And that's pretty much it. So I'm just going to send this, and I'm just going to wait for this thing to process. And you can see over here that I'm purposely using Opus 4.8. Medium, mainly because this is a pretty complex task because we are building a workflow, but feel free to experiment what works best for you. All right, so I'll see you guys real soon. This thing is processing. I do want to say that I did set this up to automatically approve, and basically what that does is it allows Claude to run on its own. And so it's just going to keep on doing it unless it deems an action to be unsafe, and then that's going to ask me for my permission. So it just makes my life a lot more easier. But you feel free to do whatever is comfortable to you. All right, so now it's asking me questions about whether or not it wants me to start building, and you can immediately see that it starts creating a plan, right? So it creates an email for the new leads, and it creates an email for the returning contacts, and it kind of breaks down how it's going to basically do that entire process along with the trigger. So I'm just going to say build it as described. Now it's going to start working on that response. All right, welcome back. So you can see that it has finally completed the workflow. So I can click and see what exactly it was able to do. I'm just going to put this inside here so it'll be easier to look at. And you can see that we have that same diagram, right? So we have that email that is going to be the trigger, the extracting of the name in the email. It's going to look at our Google Sheets, and then it has that branching logic, right? So if an existing, send the welcome back. And if basically new, it's going to send a nice warm welcome. All right, so pretty neat. So let's actually try to test this out. Right now, you're going to notice that it hasn't been published yet. mainly because we want to first test it internally to make sure it works well. And if we know it works well for sure, then we can publish and it'll just run on its own. All right. So in order for this email to trigger, I need to first add an email into that Stoic programmer. So I have another account, which is going to basically message that. So as you notice right now, right, I don't have that Henry or that email inside here yet. So it's going to send me a new email response. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to simply compose a message to that Stoic programmers. Hello, hello. Nice to meet you, or something. I'm just going to click send. And then if I go inside here, you can see I already have sent it, but we're going to test it out again. I don't think that is the message. Oh, there it is. Okay. So now that I have access to this, now I'm going to go over to my workflow and I'm going to click on execute workflow. And now it's going to take that email. It's doing some processing. It's going to add to new contact and it sends the welcome email. Okay, that's funny. It actually worked the first time. Usually if it doesn't, you can always go over to Claude and ask, what exactly is the error and just have it fix it for you. But in my case, you can see over here in my Scanovation that I was able to receive a nice warm welcome, right? Thank you so much for reaching out. Welcome. And you're going to see inside our sheet that we also have added that information as well too, right? And so next time, if I were to actually write another email, which I could definitely do right now, I'll just compose another email to Stoic Programmer. So if I basically send this over, it's going to run a different type of branching logic because now I'm no longer new inside that sheet. So this is going to also take some time to send, hopefully. And I'll just kind of clear this all out just to make it a little bit more cleaner. Okay, so we have the email now. And so now I can go back into my workflow and I'm going to click on execute workflow. It's going to do the parsing, checking the sheets. It says I already exist. And then it's going to now say the welcome back email. So now if I go back inside here, you're going to see that I will receive good to hear from you again, Scanovation. All right, so some very simple branching, but you can see that just taking that very predictable process or taking that repeatable process and making it predictable. Okay, so the thing is mistakes do happen. And when mistakes do happen, right, NAI makes it very easy to find ways to look for that error and to analyze it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we can find those errors, how we can analyze it, and then also just whenever you do face an error, you can always copy and paste that into Claude and have it help you guide you through the process of fixing it or having it fix it directly for you. Okay, so I want to purposely cause an error. So if I go inside here, you're going to see that in our workflow, and your workflow might be looking different. You're going to see that we're using that column email, which you can find inside here, right? So what happens if someone accidentally goes inside our sheet, changes that to an S, and I'm going to make sure I save that. And now if I go over to my workflow again and I execute the workflow, you're going to see it keeps on running and then bam, it's going to fail, right? So if you have this thing running in the background, what's nice about it is that you get a nice overview of like how exactly your workflows are doing, right? The amount of times it's executing, the time it has failed, the failure rate, and then you can actually look into execution to look specifically at what might be the problem that's going on. And you can also debug inside there. And so if we basically open that up, you're going to see that it's just going to immediately throw the error that it's not going to be able to find that email inside the sheet or that column email. And so let's say that this is still quite complicated, right? You can easily copy and paste the error, find the execution, go back into your Claude, and you can just talk to Claude and say like, hey, here's an execution that failed. This is the error that I received. Can you guide me through the process of how we can fix this? Or you can actually have Claude help you fix that process too. But because we already know the error, right, I'm just going to go back into my sheets, just going to change this back to emails. I'm going to make this thing save. And then I'm just going to simply go to that part that failed. And I'm just going to retry with the current save workflow. I'm going to rerun it. And then hopefully it's going to rerun successfully because we know where the error is at. Okay. So yeah, so that's great. It's great about NAN. It makes it very visible of how your entire workflow is doing, and it makes it easy to check where the errors are coming from if they do pop up. All right, so we're going to work on this next workflow, which is very exciting because we're going to be embedding an AI agent inside it. So we're going to be using Gemini because it has a nice free tier. But what's going to happen is we're going to put an AI agent in the middle. It's going to read our emails. It's going to help us summarize, flag the urgent ones, and then it's going to file it in the next or in the right Google Sheet list. And so what's also going to be happening is it's going to help us categorize between those things like support, sales, and general type of messages. All right, so for a quick high review, once we get the name and email information, we're going to have Gemini read the subject and the body. It's going to return back some useful information like the category. And depending on the category, right, if it is sales, it's going to label that email as sales, and it's going to add a row to our lead tab, which you can see over here is part of our sheets that we're going to populate. And then you can also see it does that with all the other process as well too. Like for support and general, it's not going to do anything with the Excel, but it is going to label it. For these labels, you can have Claude do it, but for me personally, it's very easy to do. So I just went inside my email, added each of those labels for general, sales, and support. Okay, so let's start building it in the next one. Okay, so if you remember, we already have access to our Gmail and our Google Excel credentials, but now we need to have our credentials for Gemini. So what you're going to do is you're going to create an account on aistudio.google.com. You could just use your Google account. And then inside here, given that you do create this, you're going to see get API key. I already have an API key, but I'm going to click something called create API key. And you're going to need to actually create a new project. In my case, I called it NAN tutorial. I'm going to create the key. And then basically what's going to happen is it's going to create an API key that I'm going to be using. All right. So what's going to happen is I'm just going to simply copy this, and it's using a free trial. So their trial for Google AI Studio is quite generous. So it's going to be enough for us to kind of play around with it. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back into my NAN. I'm going to go over to my overview, and I'm going to go back to credentials. And so now I'm going to search for Gemini, and I'm just going to simply put that API key that I basically copied, and then I'm going to save it. And now you're going to see that our credential is going to be located inside here. So all that's left now is we just need to run the prompt, and it's going to combine all of these components together. All right, so now we have our credentials. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go back to my Claude. I already pasted the prompt that I'm going to be using, which again, you can copy and paste from the guide under the video description. And you can see that inside here, it's the same exact process that I talked about the flow, right? I'm saying add a second branch to the same workflow. Basically, every email, I wanted to basically have Gemini read the email subject, get the category, the one sentence summaries. And then remember, we talked about the different labels. So if it deems the category as sales, do this, support, do this, etc. And then I even told it, just to be sure, that the AI only sorts, it never replies. A person always handles that actual reply, right? And that's all I basically need to do. And so because I already set up all the credentials for NAN, it's going to be able to put that component all together. So I'm just going to simply click send. We're going to wait for this to process. And you can see that it's going to also continue to ask me questions. So it says it's ready for me to add it. So I'm just going to say, yes, add it in. And it says, which Gemini model should the classifier use? Which is interesting because I died to find it inside there already. Okay, but I'm just going to basically use the 3.5 flash. Say it right here. Okay, well, I think it's good that it still asks some clarifying questions. And so now it's just going to process that information, and we'll just have to wait. All right, so it looks like it has completed. So you can see we have our workflow here. So I'm just going to click this, and I'm just going to pop it up inside here. And we are going to have a look and see how we can test it out and see if it works. Okay, so you can see over here that it's going to be using our same workflow, but it's just branching off. And so you can see over here that it has a logic where it's going to classify it. It's using our Gemini Flash in order to do that classification. And then you can see based on our logic, and this looks a little confusing. So let me just push this down a little bit. Oops, let me push this down a little bit. Yeah, so you can see over here that once it makes that classification, it's going to see if it sells, support, or general, and it's going to do its individual actions. So let's just test it to see if it works. So I'm going to just go over into my account again. I'm just going to send them another email and just say, so programmers, I'm going to say, I want a refund. I really disliked your product. It was really bad. I want my money back. So I'm going to send that over, and we're going to see it pop up inside here for a moment. Just going to give it some time. Make sure I did send it, by the way. Emails do take a while, don't they? Okay, so the emails comes in. I want a refund. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my account, and I'm just going to execute the workflow. So it's going to run the first workflow, right? So it's basically doing updates existing contact, and then it's classifying, and you can see it's able to label it as a support, right? And so now if I go back into my sheet, to support, you're going to see it pops up and it says that, hey, this customer is upset. Here's a link to that Gmail, and it basically prioritizes it as high. And you're going to see that it's going to do the same thing with like maybe a general question. So I can go inside here and I can say something like question. I could be like, I want to know more information about y'all's pricing, right? And so I can basically send that message, and then basically we go over to our Stoic programmers. We're going to be able to run that. And you can see it also labeled it as well too, right? So label that as support. And then hopefully the next email that we receive is going to be labeled as sales. So I'm just going to go back inside here again. I'm just going to execute the workflow. It's going to do the same process, and hopefully it goes to sales. Come on. Yeah, it goes to sales. Nice. So now if I go over to my leads, you can see it pops up and it gives me some priority as normal. And yeah, so you can see that we were able to use Gemini to help us actually break down the classification. And then we use NEN's way to basically branch out the different logics of what to do. I also forgot to mention that you can see if we were to refresh this, it also labels that as a sales as well too. So everything is working fine. All right. So this is kind of what I mean is that like NEN and using these autonomous AI agents together can be very complementary, right? You can see that classification, and then it was able to do some branching logic, which was predictable workflows. So yeah, you can see this is what we have built entirely. I know it looks really complicated at the end, but we were able to use Claude to help us build this entire process thanks to that NEN connector. All right. So now that we're all satisfied with the process, the last thing we need to do is just to publish our change. So as of now, we've been basically manually executing that workflow. But now what happens is like when we do publish those type of changes, now it's going to be listening to our Gmail. So whenever new Gmail or new emails come in, it's going to automatically run this type of workflow. All right, so congrats to making it to the end. So what we basically built is two workflows. So whenever we receive an email, basically the first workflow was a way for it to remember and greet the user, whether they were new or existing. And then the other second workflow was basically a way to embed an AI agent, which was going to help us with the classification and help us sort between our different types of emails and adding them into the proper Google Sheets. So complementary of having NAN with an autonomous AI agent. All right, so congrats to making it to the end. Again, all the folders and files are located in the video description, so feel free to try it out yourself and have a good time.